I'll just share a little bit of language, and then we can have an experience. Would you be willing to try a little experience? Cool. And then what I'll do is, as we experience this very simple constellation, I'll walk you through some other things, some of the things we can notice about the way the language of the systems and capital S systemic speaks through us. So make a little working space on your tabletop, if you will. It doesn't have to be big. Just clear a little area. If you want to work on a book, that's fine. If you want to work in an area in the floor, that's also fine. Just make a little working space on your desktop. And before we really set up a mini constellation, I will say that for those of you that have experienced family constellations, we use really big maps. And we even use people and say, you represent this part of the map and you represent that part of the map. Wow, now we're getting pretty dynamic with our maps and what can speak through the representatives of that map. We're going to keep it simple here with just objects. The map can be the entire room. The map can be something very small. The system still speaks, just much like language. My teacher, Matthias, he says, if you've ever been to Europe, in places like Italy, Italian Cultural Center, big gestures, yes, lots of body language. That's how this culture speaks. If you have ever been, used to teach a lot in places like Poland and Serbia, and the gestures are much smaller, but the system is still speaking, right? It might even be just pointing with your nose. So the gestures that we notice and the way that life speaks through us is different. It might be big and large movements. It might be small and subtle. And I invite you to just notice as we move along what occurs in your mind, in your thoughts, in your feelings, in your breath, in your inner dialogue as we explore. And I'm going to walk through some structures to explore with. And maybe what I'll ask you to do is set up a small map first. I call this the U+1 constellation. So think of a topic, and maybe let's make it even simpler. Think of a goal that you have. And it can be a really big lifetime goal, or it could be some small micro goal, like a project you have coming up next week. It doesn't matter. Whatever is important enough for you to explore. And I'm going to ask you to choose 2 objects. So the first object, choose yourself in the context of this goal, in the context of you in relation to this goal. So choose some object. It might be a glass. Just don't think about it too much. Just grab something. It might be your phone. It might be a pen. I think there's some Post-its on the table. You could use that. Don't use the Post-its. Don't use the Post-its. So sorry. But find some other object to represent you in relation to your goal. Has everyone got something to represent themselves? And mindfully, feeling your breath, feeling your weight on the chair, feeling your presence, move that thing that you've chosen to represent you into your working space and just really place it intentionally. And you can keep your hand on it for a moment, as if you could just embody you in the context of you and your goal. And now that that object is there, does it feel better, worse, the same, or different than when we started? Okay, take your hand off of the object, just brush it. Instead of shaking it rudely, you can just, brush your pants subtly, energetic hygiene between each kind of experiment here. I'm going to invite you now to choose something to represent your goal. And again, don't think too much about it. Whatever object would metaphorically for you meaningfully represent your goal. And place that intentionally. As you connect to your body, you connect to your breath, just put that in the space where it feels right. And for the next moment, just leave your hand on that object that would represent your goal. I'm going to grab something for myself here. So with your hand now on the goal that you've chosen, just feel into that as if you could just step into that representation and notice what you notice. Does it feel better, worse, the same, or different than when we started? And then take your hand off. You could shake it. Whatever little gesture would just be like your way of energetically clearing that experience. And already something from structure is happening here. On one hand, we have a meta position. We're on the outside looking at this map now. We've externalized what was in our head and we're looking at it from the outside. And we're also stepping in, associated embodied just for a moment and feeling the inside of that, being on the outside and stepping in. And just that, those parts of information are already really valuable. When we can see something out of our head, it's like already maybe you're getting some interesting ideas. That's fascinating. We could also say that we've got a structure here. This is you, well, in this case, this is me, and this is my goal. And if my goal was breaking down in tears, or was really angry, or was really somehow emotional, that would be a bit odd from the perspective of structure. Because a goal is just a goal. It doesn't have feelings, it doesn't have emotions. And often what that shows is we've placed something to be our goal, but in front of that is an old story. There's something else in the way of that. It might be that this goal represents our mother or our money issues or past ancestral experiences that are playing out underneath. So we can start to notice if something in the map is behaving absurdly or is not life-affirming, there's usually some old pattern, old story in the way of what Adam called like this light that is actually who we are. So if you notice that there's really difficult emotions anywhere, it might be that there's something in the way of you being able to see or experience that goal clearly. And we can ponder what that is. We can ponder what other interventions might support a new way of thinking about things. So we can use simple structures to explore our map. The first one is the perceptual positions. Have you heard of perceptual positions? Yeah, if you've come from the world of NLP, you might be familiar with this. Otto Scharmer also uses this fourth position, the field position, as the we position. And we've already been doing this. We've got first person, second person, third person is the observer on the outside, the meta, and the fourth is the experience of all of it. And if we had more elements on the map, we could continue to just try on all of these positions. Now, we want to just explore a little bit here how the language of the system is speaking through this map. And as you look from that outside perspective, I'm going to invite you, first of all, to just reflect on how that felt as you tried on both. And you can try it on again if you want. Did it feel better or worse when the goal came in to your space? What do you notice about the space in between? Is it far away? Is it close to you? Do you notice, if you look at your own representative, are you looking at the goal? Or are you turned in another direction away from it? One simple intervention might be just to turn and look and acknowledge, oh, I see you. Interesting. Is it easy to look at your goal or not? Is one really big and one really small? Are they both similar? It might be something metaphoric. I've got water and cream. Don't really blend very well. That's interesting. What other metaphors come up as you look at the objects that you selected for you and for your goal in this context? And what does that tell you? We can notice, even if there was a timeline here, where's the future? Now, you might say, well, of course the future is towards my goal, but a lot of people actually, interestingly, put their goal behind them. That says a lot, that we are aiming for the past and fixing the past. The members of the system now who have a body are often trying to balance the system. And so learning to use constellation work on one hand is already just simply learning to use a map. And on the other, it's learning to listen to the systemic impulses that are moving through us. And we can discover that, like the work with Bert Hellinger, he was the one that really began to use family constellations, found that there are systemic principles or orders that all living systems, like laws, operate from. One is that if it is, it is. And we need to acknowledge what showed up, what happened here. There's no mistakes. That everything belongs. And sometimes what our map will show us is maybe that this, if I'm looking over here, that there's something else that belongs, that needs to be acknowledged. If you feel that there's something in your map that would benefit from adding one more piece, go ahead and do that. Everything belongs. What would you add into your map at the moment that would be support? It might be a resource. We can notice order, what came first, second, third. We can notice how to balance the system, and these principles will guide the questions you ask in your coaching sessions. What needs to be acknowledged when you look at your map? If there is an acknowledgement, what would that be? Often the things we want to get away from are really the ones we need to bring in, acknowledge, and include. What else belongs in this picture here? What would you add? I'll leave the other 3 acknowledgements, or pardon me, principles, because I know we're nearing the end. But I hope that just by setting up a small map of you in relation to your goal has already brought up some ideas, some questions. And this is something you can do with your clients now. Just get them to draw the picture. Just get them to put the picture on the tabletop and be curious. It's amazing what starts to happen. And then if you want to get more adept at using these maps and helping clients have real breakthroughs in releasing the past, seeing the future clearly, healing the past. Coaching is not therapy, but it is therapeutic, because what we do now impacts everything. And the work that we do with our clients is so important to everything. I really appreciate all of you being willing to experience, not just hear me talk, but to actually do this with me, everybody. Thank you so much.